Hi, it's Ronald the Rules Lawyer. Now on to part 2 of my Rules Lawyer Guide to Foundry Virtual Tabletop. In part 1, I went over the basics on what I recommend Pathfinder 2e GMs do running the game in Foundry, including modules I recommend for basic functionality. I set aside 3 modules for this video because they have a lot within them, a lot that I think is useful, and I wanted to give them their own video. This includes quality of life enhancements, automation, having fake names of monsters that players see, having fireballs target several creatures at once, rolling their saving throws together and applying damage to them. Those are the kinds of things we'll see today. Before I talk about today's mods, I need to mention one module that helps if you run several worlds at once like I do. Today's mods have a lot of knobs and dials to them, and it gets annoying to have to do that in more than one world. This module, Forien's copy environment, lets you export the settings of your Foundry world in a file that when you open another world, you can import those settings into that other world. Now, I've not found it imports 100% of everything, but it does save a lot of work. Also, I should warn you that it copies the calendar date from one world to the next. You'll want to uncheck that if you want to preserve the in-world calendar date of your second world. All right, here we are back in the ghost town fighting a young green dragon. The first module I'll talk about today is called PF2e Workbench. It's a hodgepodge of features that support running Pathfinder that the developers say did not justify their own separate modules and may well be eaten up by the main Pathfinder system for Foundry at some point. So I have Workbench installed and we'll see what it does. We're gonna go through the settings. There is a lot of settings. The first is NPC mystification settings. This lets you create fake names for monsters. I'll first show you how it works for me, and then I'll show you the settings I use for it. So when I want to add monsters to my battle map, I can click and drag the creature onto the screen and it shows as a goblin commando, but I don't want the players to see that. And I set my default token settings so that they can all see the name of the token when they hover over it. So I want to give it a fake name. So what I do is I hold Control while dragging the creature onto the map, and now it says electronic small humanoid. It will say small humanoid for every goblin I place because it is the size of the creature and what type of creature they are. But this first adjective is clearly at random, and the next one I place by holding Control, clicking and dragging is going to say it is an exact small humanoid. This leads to a lot of fun moments at the table when they're fighting some person with a funny descriptor. And also, it clearly makes it easy to point out who you are talking about to the GM and to other players. When I right-click the token, this mystification is represented by this highlighted eye with the slash. If I untoggle it, then it becomes demystified, and it's now simply an electronic goblin commando. It kept the adjective. By the way, if you don't want the players to see a token you put on the map, you want to hold Alt when you place the token. Then it becomes invisible to them, which you can always toggle by right-clicking the token. This is how I like to run it in my games, and this is how I set it up. Under the Workbench settings, I click Manage NPC Mystification Settings, and I want to check Enable NPC Mystifier. There's a lot of other settings here that you should go through, and also this module will be updated after I publish this video, so I won't go into 100% detail. Then I want to add a random property of chosen type to name. For the drop-down next to it, I want to select word as prefix, meaning before the monster's name. And in the next blank space, I want to say where it will draw the random word from, and here it will come from Workbench Adjectives. When you install this mod, you're going to see Workbench Adjectives somewhere in this window. There's another place where I found it down here where I did not want it to be. Don't confuse these blank spaces with that. These spaces are called word or rollable table prefix and postfix, respectively. And what these do is add a random word at the beginning or at the end of the name. However, it does not stick with the name when you demystify it. I want the adjective to stay with the name when I demystify the creature, which is this next checkbox, by the way. You want to check off this. Keep prefix when mystifying and demystifying. So even if I were to mystify the electronic goblin commando again, the electronic word sticks with the name, and when I put it back. You probably do want to check this box to skip adding a random word to unique NPCs. This way it only adds a word to generic monsters so that you don't get electronic Vecna or exact Vecna, or maybe you do want that. It's up to you. Another thing this does is that when, say, a party member identifies a creature and knows what it is, when you demystify one of them, it demystifies all of them. So now I just changed one token's settings and demystified it. Now they're all revealed to be goblin commandos, so long as they're based on the same actor on the right-hand side. The next thing I'll go over under Workbench are the reminder settings. Here, you get Foundry to remind you of different things. You can have it prompt a player when they don't target a foe when they make an attack, and other things for players or the GM that are easy to forget. Here is the hero point handler. You can have it so that whenever you boot up Foundry, this handy hero point handler comes up. This lets you reset everyone's hero points to 1, and also award a hero point if you'd like. And you can have this pop up every hour if you wanted to. I personally don't use it because I tend to remember to give hero points, but not everybody will. Next under Workbench are World QOL Quality of Life settings. Here I check the box so that I can have one of my monsters cast a spell privately. It does not show up in the chat window, unless someone in the party knows the spell. Next under Workbench are world automation settings. There's a lot under this window. A lot of the automation that is involved with death and dying is here. You can set it so that when someone is knocked out, their initiative changes to right before the current actor. It can automatically, when someone recovers from dying, increase their wounded condition and make them unconscious if they're at 0 hit points, and remove that if they are healed to above 0. You can make it when someone's knocked out, automatically add their current wounded value to their dying condition. You can have it factor in a critical hit so that they go straight to dying 2 or worse, increase their dying value when they take damage while dying, and treat non-lethal damage differently. And finally have a character drop held items when unconscious, which is what the official rules say. And for all of these, you can have it treat party creatures differently from enemy creatures. Those all affected the world, so all of your players also. There are also client automation settings here under Workbench. Here you can have it automatically apply persistent damage when you end your turn, and automatically roll a recovery roll after that, and apply the results, and also have it automatically decrease the frightened condition when you end your turn. Many things that I think are good. Though if these truly are client settings, then every player will need to set these themselves too. Okay, and below those buttons under the Workbench settings, there's a lot of other things that to me are relatively minor at the time of this video, but feel free to look at them yourself. Now I want to talk about other things in the Workbench module. It's not just these settings. First, there's a lot of useful tools in the compendium that comes with this module, called naturally PF2e Workbench. So here's one of the folders which has basic action macros. This is an amazing macro that I suggest every player put in their hotkey bar. Select a party member, and when you activate it, all of these actions, skill actions, come up. They're color-coded by how proficient you are in them. And if you are the best in the party at something, it will show up in gold text. So I have Valeros's basic actions up, and he's the best at all of these athletics actions. You can also target creatures with these. So our monk here can go up, try to demoralize the goblin, and succeed. And then next we'll try to grapple the goblin. Critical success, and naturally all of these actions have red rectangles, which are your friend, remember, from part 1. I clicked the button for demoralize, and it automatically applied frightened 1 and demoralize immunity from the monk for 10 minutes. And then I can drag this restraint condition onto the goblin. We also have a macro to refocus, which can also naturally be dragged to the hotkey bar. All of these macros, by the way, can be findable through a control space if you installed the quick insert search widget module that I talked about in part 1. So control space, basic action macro, and there it is. There's a lot of useful tools here. I've only scratched the surface in the Workbench module. Here we also have the recall knowledge action, and right now I have our bard selected. If I were targeting the goblin, it would only apply this roll to the goblin. This is what recalling knowledge about the goblin would look like. I will deselect the goblin and click it, and we see a random roll that lists all of the skills that likely would be used for a recall knowledge check, and only the GM gets to see these results. Under the Workbench Items Compendium, we find a lot of adjustments to create ghouls and mummies. You just drag it to a creature, and they become a ghoul version of the creature. But here is where we have an easy way to apply bard effects to the party. We have a aura called Courageous Anthem. Instead of applying the spell effect from chat when you cast Courageous Anthem, you're going to want to have this aura instead. And when you apply it to our bard, he inspires every ally within the aura. And note that it is only affecting the allies, including Make and the cat, and none of the enemies. That's why Foundry asks you whether creatures are allies or enemies, so that it can do things like this. And when it expires, just toggle it off, it will remove it from the allies. The other bard compositions are here also. By the way, a lot of other aura effects like the Bless spell or some kineticist powers operate in the same way, but they're just part of the base Pathfinder 2e system in Foundry. So Kyra casts the Bless spell, it has an aura in chat, and this can just be placed on Kyra, and it creates an aura. Very cool. And as you can see, everyone has a little marker, a condition showing that they benefit from Bless. And just to show off Foundry and also Pathfinder a little more, while you are selecting Kyra, you can sustain your Bless spell, which expands the radius. And you do that here by left-clicking the condition in the upper right corner, and it will expand it. So now the monk is benefiting from the Bless spell. One last cool thing that I'll show from the Workbench module that is available today is a quick way to adjust the level of a creature. Let's say I want this young green dragon to be lower level. So what I do is I right-click it in the actors directory, right here. I right-click it, and then I click Scale to Level. And what that does is it creates, okay, I put in a range of levels that I wanted to create another version of this dragon in. I naturally just want it to be one level, and I'll say level 6. So I'm just going to say minimum level 6, maximum level 6. What that will do right now is create a new folder called level 6 right here. And in that folder, it will have a level 6 version of the dragon. And I will put it up on the screen and put their stats side by side. And, you know, because Pathfinder its math is worked out, it's pretty accurate. So here we are. You can pause your video and see that all of the statistics have been adjusted to be a level 6 creature instead. I found this to be pretty damn accurate, and maybe it was a little off here and there where damage formulas were involved, but it was still very close. So in a pinch, this is definitely useful, and I just used it in a session the other day to make an entire group of unique NPCs 2 levels higher. It just took less than a minute. Oh, I'll show their breath weapon on the screen as well to show that it actually did figure that out too. Okay, so that was just one module. The next module is PF2e Toolbelt, and I'm not sure why exactly it's separate from Workbench. I just assume it's a different set of developers. But this has a lot of cool settings. I'm not going to go over all of them, again, because this module will be updated, but also I don't understand every single feature. Like this one, it lets you link a macro to a character action. So I think if you do something from your character sheet, it automates it some way. If you go to their website, it will explain how to do that. But that was a level of technicality that I did not feel capable of grasping. But here we find the automatic rune progression variant. I did a video critical of the official variant that increases player characters' statistics in accordance with the expected bonuses you get from magic items. It also eliminated item bonuses entirely, which has some bad effects, I think, on the system. Automatic rune progression just simply adjusts all of the weapons and armor to have the fundamental runes that you would expect at a given level. So here I will enable it, I'll check that, and also not force update, so that if somebody has something higher level than their current level, let's say a lower level character has a +2 weapon when they're only expected to have a +1 weapon, it would keep and preserve the +2 weapon. So I save the changes, and we'll see what it does when I reload. All right, so here we see that Valeros, our fighter, his equipment, including his shield boss on his shield, all have +1 striking runes on them. This wasn't true before. And every time we add something new, let's add the gnome flick mace, it will automatically add those runes to the weapon I add. Same thing with armor. If I add leather armor to his character sheet, it will automatically make it a +1, which is what you'd expect at his level. He's level 5. This also works for hand wraps and mighty blows too, as you can see. It just doesn't change the name currently. So that's automatic rune progression variant. Also under PF2e Toolbelt, we see a lot of quality of life improvements. Here is Giveth, which I like to have enabled. This allows players to add items to other creatures' tokens that they do not own. So if they want to add, say, the guidance spell effect to an ally themselves, even though they don't own that ally's token, this mod lets them do so, as long as that other token's owned by a player. Here we have the Hero Point deck variant, if you like that. You can have dropped equipment not count against a character's bulk. You can have a handy interface for stances. So I have it turned on right now, and I'm going to bring up the monk's character sheet. Under actions, there is this button here for him to enter tiger stance. So right now he can click it, and it's a simple toggle. He can turn it on and off. Now these I really like. They are called Target Helper and Template Helper, and I'll show it in action by having our wizard cast a fireball. So Ezrin will cast Fireball, and a button appears in chat to place a 20-foot burst, and he is going to do so. He's going to place it right here, and it allows him to make it only target enemies or allies. But okay, first there's a cool animation, as you can see part 3 of my series to know how I did that. But as you can see, that window that popped up lets me automatically target every creature within it, including poor Valeros. It is going to give me all of these little damage buttons for every creature. Now there's a tiny d20 here that the player can, I think, see and roll if they want to roll their save. Okay, Valeros rolled a nat 17. He succeeded against Ezrin's fireball, and not only did it display that he succeeded, but now the half damage button is highlighted in a special color to show that is the result. So we all know which button to click to apply the correct damage now. There are similar buttons to roll all of the monsters' saving throws. I don't have to do them all individually. I can right-click the damage card here. For some reason, I have to click the upper half of it at the time of this video. I'm not sure why. And then I can click Roll All Saves. And we will see what happens. There we go. So it shows all of the failures in orange, all of the critical failures in red, and all of the successes in blue. Now I click all of these damage buttons, and it will apply them accordingly to all of the tokens. And pretty much all the goblins are dead, except for one of them. By the way, if for some reason I want to add a target after putting Fireball in chat, let's say I forgot to add the dragon to some spell I cast, then here in chat I see this little bullseye button. If I have the dragon targeted, I click it, and it will replace my previous targets with the dragon. You can target multiple creatures with the shift key as well and have it target them by pressing this bullseye, like so. All right, that is the Toolbelt module. The next one I'm going to show is called Monk's Combat Details. Now, I don't know who Monk is, but they make a lot of useful mods that are very useful for 5e worlds in Foundry also. But this was the one I found so far that's most useful for Pathfinder GMs. There is a lot of useful settings here. I'll point out some highlights. Here I check the box Order Initiative so that if there's a lot of creatures in the initiative tracker, the players are always at the top so that they can easily find themselves to roll their own initiative. Show Combat Playlist. Here's an alternative way to set a playlist for an encounter. In part 1, I talked about having a single default playlist. Here, when you start an encounter and put it in the encounter tracker, and you have not actually begun the encounter yet, there is this little drop-down menu that lets you choose among all of your playlists for that battle. It will start that playlist when combat starts and end it when it ends, and return to what the previous soundscape was. Show Start Token creates a ghost of your character's token where they start their turn. So as you can see, as the rogue moves away, there's a little ghost of her where she started. Very useful if you lose track of where you came from. You can have the camera pan to whoever's turn it is. You can switch everyone to the combat tab when combat is created, where everyone can then roll their initiative. And then it brings them all to the chat tab once they've rolled initiative. This, your mileage may vary. It makes the combat dialogue pop out and brings everyone to the chat window in their main right-hand sidebar, and it closes the combat when you're done. Now, this is something I really like, and it doesn't always work for me, and I think it's because I have all these modules installed, but when it does work, it's nice. Hide enemies, so that when they're all rolling initiative, you might have some monsters hiding, for example, and not want the characters to know what lies in wait. But it reveals them once the combat starts, which I don't like. I usually don't like my players to know when the enemies will have their first turn, so that they don't metagame around that. At least not that early in a fight. That's what this next setting is for. It's called Hide Until Turn. It hides enemies on the combat tracker until they have their turn. Perfect. This one's also useful if a monster was invisible and then becomes visible over the course of the combat. This one automatically reveals them in the combat tracker. You don't have to reveal them on the map and then again on the combat tracker. Auto scroll combat tracker, useful if you have a lot of creatures in a battle. It makes the current actor always visible. And then we have notifications for players telling them when they're next up or when it's their turn. And there are sound effects attached to them, and I have not actually tried these yet because I'm concerned they might play on everyone's turn and that everyone hears everyone else's sound. I'll let people in chat tell me if that is true or not. But that's it. Those are these 3 modules that I wanted to highlight for this video. So that was part 2. And part 3, like and subscribe and ring the bell to get notified, will be about making your Foundry experience more entertaining, more sexy, more good. Also, join my Discord where I keep a list of my modules that I use for a Foundry VTT that I try to keep as up to date as possible. When you join my Discord, look for the channel titled VTT Advice, and it will be a pinned comment over there. Also join my Discord to talk Pathfinder 2e and other gaming, and if you want to play Pathfinder 2e, we have our drop-in, drop-out organized play system called Endless Tale Tavern. And lastly, support my Patreon for ad-free early access to most of my videos and exclusive content. So that's it. I've been Ronald the Rules Lawyer. See you next time.